Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. So in our session today, we'll be talking about the Case for Women research and how you could submit to your case for the Case for Women competition. So I just want to start with a couple of housekeeping items. So the webinar today will last an hour, but we will be recording it, so feel free to share it with your colleagues when we send that round to you. And there is time for a Q&A at the end, but if you want to ask questions as we're going along, please feel free to put those in the question panel, which you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar viewer. My name is Andrea Longrig. I'm a marketing manager at Emerald Publishing, and I'll introduce you to our presenters today. So first we have Lesley Symons, who is the founder of the Case for Women. And from Emerald, we have Juliet Harrison, who is our Publishing Cases lead, who will talk about the logistics of the competition and how you can enter, and we'll also tell you a bit about the Emerald Cases Hub. So I'm first going to hand over to Lesley so that she can start us off.
Okay, show my screen. Hi everyone, I can't see you, but you can see me and the presentation. So welcome from wherever you are in the world today. What I want to do is to share you some of my research on business school case papers, which is quite relevant to the competition, and also to just some insights about writing case papers that I found from this. What I've actually put here today is I'd like to dedicate this webinar to Deborah Tim, who is a dear friend of mine and was a judge on our inaugural competition, who passed away sadly last month from COVID. So next, first of all, a poll question for you. So do you teach, do you write, or do you read, or none of the above case papers?
Okay, so I'll just give you a minute to fill that poll in and then I'll close it.
So do you teach, write, read, or none of the above case papers?
Okay,
whatever.
So we've got 20% teach cases, 20% write cases, and 60% read papers. Okay,
cool. Okay, you will, for those that read it, you will probably have noticed what I'm going to talk to you about in terms of the research for yourselves, and those that teach and write, you probably also know it as well, but there just might be some more interesting things in this for you to notice going forward. So today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the research results. I'm going to talk about the meaning for schools and for female students and male students, and also some prep or reflections for case writing and the competition. So why is this topic interesting and worth studying? It's all about women as company leaders and on boards, hot topic. Business schools play an integral role in developing leaders for the future. Topic of current debate, more women entering business schools than ever before. We've noticed this, there's a lot more students, but is it changing in the schools and in the classroom? And the underlying messages to women and men at business schools. So there's a couple of key reports that I cited in my research, but I thought you might be interested to know of. 2011 was the European Business School and European Commission Call to Action report. And then 2015 was the White House had a, this was during the Obama years, the Council of Economic Advisors issued a brief expanding opportunities for women in business. And one of the things it said was it recommended increasing men's awareness of gender issues by revising teaching materials and presenting more case studies that included women leaders. So for my next poll, I'd like to understand, have you heard of either of these two papers? Yes, just a simple yes or no. Have you heard of either of these two?
Okay, so 63% say no and 38% say yes.
Okay, great. So the thing I might say is particularly the White House white paper, I think is particularly interesting to look at if you're interested in this area. And actually also if you need any, what I call ammunition, if you're, I don't know whether you're in schools or not, to help show why we need to change cases and show more female leaders. So it's just useful, I believe. So my research context was in the context of the case centre case papers, and I'll explain about those. And it's part of the learning mix for MBA students. My research analysed how women are portrayed in case papers. I started off by just wanting to look at female protagonists, but I soon realised there weren't any women in the papers at all, let alone as protagonists. And when I was at my business school that I went to, I researched it in the context of women building a leader identity at business schools, because we often talk about at business schools, it's a time for us to play with our leadership style. And I wanted to set it in that for women. So the case papers researched, I've got 12 years now, this is 12 years of research. So there's 119 award-winning case papers across 10 categories. And these papers are the papers that are most widely distributed. So they might not be the biggest in number, but they're most widely across institutions across the world. And there's each year there's 10 award-winning categories. The reason there's 119 is because one paper won twice. And then I cross-reference it with the 3 best-selling case papers each year, and they are just by volume. And the reason there's only 6 is because the same papers are the best-selling case papers every year. So 125 different cases in total. So this is what I found. Of the 125, 123 papers have mentioned men in it. 84 papers with a woman mentioned in it. However, we believe that the case for women, that really those papers, only 58 of those papers have a women what we call present. In other words, she's in a role that you would notice in the story. She plays an integral role. She's not written as the customer or as someone bringing in the coffee. She's an integral part of the story. And 41 papers, or 33% of papers, have absolutely no women in them at all. So a poll question for you. Of the 125 papers, how many do you think have a female leader? And the choices are 6, 14, 20, or 25.
Okay, so 67% think 6 and 33% think 14.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's have a look. Of the 125 papers, 96 have a male protagonist. 14 have a female protagonist. And of the 14 female protagonists, actually, originally there's really 12 papers, because 2 of the papers were originally men, and the writer changed the name of the protagonist to a female name because he realized that his female students were not seeing female protagonists or leaders in their papers. The only issue with that is that he didn't change the descriptors of those leaders, so they sound quite masculine. And in 6 papers, she is the only woman in the paper. And let's just have a look at how this has changed over time, because I think there are some changes happening due to this research and the whole question of women in business in case studies. So originally there was about, when I started it, there was about 55% of papers had a woman in it. I think at that time we deemed about 30% to have a woman present. That's increased to 67%, and now we're at 83%. And we believe that this is an easy win for people. What's happening, we believe, is that they're changing some of the names or just putting women in the papers. However, if we look at female protagonists, it's actually gone down. It's not changing at all. And this year, that's not included in the research, out of the 10 award winning, there's one paper with a female protagonist. So it's the same. So the number of characters in these papers, men still outnumber women 5 to 1. Just read a paper recently about Apple, and it's got 12 characters in it, and all of them are men, not one woman in it. So the themes, let's look at some further themes. There's the invisibility of women leaders, so no role models, pink topics or places of work, the prevalence of men, or the think manager, think male, which was Shine's research that basically showed that when we think of a manager, we think masculine, we think it's a male leader, and no interaction of women with women about the business. So it's not showing the workplace as we would know it as now, that as women in there. So first theme, invisibility of women. Most of you will probably know the Bechdel test or the Mo movie test, which is still online and still tracking movies. It's a way of measuring women's presence in movies. It has to have 2 women in it who talk to one another about something besides a man. And I still think the research is pretty dire. So I took that and put it into the Symons test. So it has to have 1 woman in it who is the protagonist, who speaks to another woman about the business. And why did we do this? Because it encourages obviously women to appear in more papers, which is where we're seeing the uplift at the moment. It encourages women to be shown as leaders, so in the middle or senior managers and up to C-suite. But finally, it ensures she isn't the only woman in the paper. She's not the lone woman. So if we look at the Symons test across these papers, 84 have a woman in it, 14 as a leader, and 4 where she speaks to another woman about the business. So if we look at themes, we look at pink topics, which is the op-ed project is a byline report out of the US that measures where women are seen in print. So it's where women writers, what topics are women seen in print? And generally they fall into the 4 Fs. This doesn't mean they're any less important, but basically women are written into print into fashion, food, furniture, and family. So if you look at places like ID and IT and the sciences, women are not seen so regularly in print. So these are called women-focused subject matters. Pink topics, 10 out of the 14 female protagonist papers fell into one of the pink topics. And the largest sector for male protagonists is IT and mobile communications. So if we go into the think manager, think male syndrome, 125 papers, 96 male protagonists, 14 female protagonists. But of the 125, 123 mention a man in it. And they mention descriptors like tough but fair, results-driven, father figure. And often what you find in papers, there's not only a male protagonist, but there's also a male founder of the business who is also described. 12 out of the 14 women protagonists is not described at all. So you don't know her background, you don't know how she's got to the leader position, you don't know her education. We know nothing. If we look at the writers, first writers are primarily men. Gets better for secondary writers for women, but still primarily men. So if we look at this, both men and women are not writing about women. Of the 52 female writers, only 39 papers or only 4 papers had women leaders. Of the 126 male writers, over 105 papers, only 12 papers had a woman leader. And 9 papers written by women had no women in them at all. So 37 papers written by men had no women in them at all. So I collaborated a couple of years ago with the Forté Foundation and the MBA Roundtable, because what I wanted to do was actually read an MBA core curricula papers. I wanted to see across a life of an MBA what students were reading, and I needed help. And Forté and Jeff from the MBA Roundtable were a fantastic help in getting me access to the schools. And I thought I'd just show you a little bit of that research just quickly. So I wanted to understand what students are seeing and reading across the life of the degree. So we researched case papers on 7 prominent US business schools. And we read the core curricula, and we read over 600 school case papers. We benchmarked on the Symons test. And this is what we found. So if you look at cases with women in them, the case centre had 67% of cases, and there's a mixture here. There's actually one school that you'll see in this that's done a review of their papers and have done a great job, and you can see the difference when you do this. So if you look at protagonists, the case centre had 11%. Actually, most of these were higher than that. We only had one school at 8%, but most were around the 20%, and you can see one school at 29%. However, when you get to speaking to another woman about the business, basically the one school that had reviewed their papers and taken the Symons test into consideration had adapted this. But most papers you're seeing, when she is the leader, she's pretty much on her own. That's just the same information, just looked slightly differently. So what could this research mean for students? So first of all, a few women in leadership could mean that we're an exception, strong stereotypes, and also it could say, which we know is not true, that women don't promote women when you've got a lone female leader in the case. Pink areas of work, so women or female leaders are only seen in specific areas, and very few female leader role models. And these are really all the informal hidden rules that sit underneath. And second generation bias, it shows male dominated hierarchies. It shows think manager, think male leadership. It could also say that, men sponsor or advocate for other men in their like, because most of the male leaders have a lot of other men in the papers. And really structures that favor men, so inflexible work structures. So the further effect for women could be the double bind effect, that management is masculine. So if I try to be like that, I'm disliked. But if I stay like I am, I might not be respected. And what we do know is that when you're highly visible, in other words, you're different to the norm or different to what you're the other in this situation, which women are, it increases or stress and reduces the motivation to want to lead. So in other words, women don't want to see them, want to be leading, knowing that they're so highly visible. And it also can lead to potential identity conflict, the conflict between her identity as a woman and her identity as a leader. And obviously there's total lack of networks, which could lead women to believing we're not welcome here, we're not equipped to lead, it obstructs us developing, practicing and learning because we're highly visible. So why would we put ourselves out? out there, validates entrenched systems, and it's not safe for women to experiment and develop. So what could this mean for business schools? No examples of different ways of leading, prevents learning for men and women about the value of both genders as leaders. Business schools are not leading the debate on the different forms of leadership. And those organisations wanting to balance boards and management are not seeing business schools modelling the way. So just some reflections for you. And I thought some key themes to be aware of in your case writing. And obviously you might already know this, but questions to challenge you and keep front of mind when writing papers. How are your students reading your papers? What are the subliminal hidden biases or messages that could be in there? What descriptors are you using for male and female characters, if any? Are women speaking to other women in the business about the business, as we see in everyday life? What is your balance of characters? Does it represent today's typical workplace? And the other thing I like to say is a leader need not be a CEO or an MD or a board member, because often that's given as an excuse. Well, there's not enough CEOs or MDs or board members. There's plenty of cases written about marketing managers, sales managers, HR, all sorts of other areas of the business. How does your teaching note reflect your case paper and vice versa? Is there any discussion or topic about gender in the teaching note? Does there need to be? Does gender play a role here, or is an under the surface bias? And how comfortable are you with this topic? Do you need learning in this area? And just finally, some questions for you and what you can do to support change. What do you think or feel about this topic? What are your biases, and do you know them? Because we all have them. And do you present papers or texts with women leaders in them? And have you noticed this before now? And are your students seeing female professors, female students, female board members, and papers and text with women leaders or women in them? And finally, in your classroom, if you are teaching, is it a safe space for women to speak up and show their talents, particularly if there's a low number of women? Is there a debate about different leadership styles and gender? Is there a debate about gender balance in business? And is there a discussion on how male qualities seem to pervade the business leadership texts? And are they getting education on second generation bias? And finally, for your institution, do you have gender initiatives? Is the debate happening, and who is leading it? And is it an important part of the school or university's values? That's me. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'll hand you back to Juliet. And I hope you found it useful, and wonder if you've got any questions. Thank you.
Lesley, there is a question that's come in. It's quite one. I'll just read it out now. So what do you think needs to happen for male case teaching faculty to adopt a case that has a female protagonist in the case, as they do exist? Are they purposely looking for a male/female protagonist, or is more that businesses are still set in old school mode and don't recruit fairly? Are they recruiting the right person for the senior roles, or silently discriminating still? This all goes full circle, but interested to know if you feel businesses are recruiting fairly.
Well, I think all of the above is probably happening in some places, but not happening in a lot of places. In terms of male professors, I mean, what we're basically seeing is that a lot of the cases are old. So cases are being regurgitated and not updated, which I think is an issue. And I think schools want to do something about it. I think they're just not sure how to go about it. And I think it needs to be dealt with at almost, obviously, at a faculty level. In terms of at companies, I think there's a huge amount of work still needed to be done on recruitment, looking at how people are recruiting, the language they're using. Again, really looking at how are they inviting people to come forward for job roles, for leader roles. So I think there's all of that. I don't know whether that answers it. Does that answer it or not?
I think all the attendees are on mute, unfortunately. So the lady who put that question in won't be able to answer. But I think it was Vicky. If you do have further questions, just pop them in the chat.
Yeah, just pop them in.
Yeah.
I hope it's sort of. I think it's a huge topic. It's a vast topic, and I think all round there's not enough happening.
I actually had a discussion with someone from the MBA Foundation who represents people taking MBAs across the world, and they said that on MBA programs it's a fairly even mix of men and women, so it's around, I think, 40-60, so they're still slightly heavier weighted towards women. So it's interesting that's not necessarily then going on to translate in the workplace. I mean, I know there's a variety of reasons for that, but it's interesting that at the education level there's not necessarily such a disparity.
Yes, but I think there's women attending MBAs, but then when they get into the schools, they're not seeing women in front of the classroom. They're not reading women in the papers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I also had a question. I know you mentioned earlier that when you were doing the analysis that you could see that some of the writers had changed the name of the protagonist. Yeah. I just didn't know how you felt about that. It feels, I'm slightly uncomfortable with that as a kind of practice.
Well, what happened was when I did my original research, it was actually 3 of the papers were written by one professor. So I actually wrote to him and said, I'm doing this research. I noticed that 3, and at that time we only had 7 leaders, so it was almost half. So I said 3 were written by you, so tell me about this. And he came back and said, I'm really sorry to disappoint you, but actually 2 of them are not women. They were originally men. He did it for the right reason, because he said what I was finding is I was going into my classroom and my female students were not seeing female leaders. So yes, he got it, but just to change the name.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we did notice from submissions to the competition last year that we actually didn't see too many submissions from the 4F category. So that was really encouraging for us.
Yes,
so there obviously is, there's a group of people out there that we can be representing. It's just trying to encourage them to write. And I think it may be in some cases, it might be people writing cases for the first time, but we provide a lot of support through the review process for that. So for those of you that haven't written teaching cases before, we can really support you with that process.
And I read every case. So
you
might regret that this time round.
I do, yes. I did last time, but anyway.
Brilliant. So we do have a short video from Jeff at the MBA Roundtable. So I'll just play that short video clip and then I'll hand over to you, Juliet, if that works okay.
Hi, I'm Jeff Baganek, and I am the Executive Director of the MBA Roundtable. We are a global association of business schools whose primary mission is to drive innovation in curriculum for graduate management education. As you can guess from our name, we have focused in the past on MBA programs, and now we are also working with specialized master's programs as well as alternative credentials in GME. We are incredibly thrilled to be part of the Case for Women case writing competition this year. We've been partnering with Lesley Symons in the Case for Women and Forté for the last few years around several initiatives. We put together an amazing workshop that's growing in demand. We have put together other research projects and are very pleased with the results. So we are pleased, especially this year, to be part of this case writing competition this year. We're really pleased as well to see that several of our members submitted cases last year for the competition, and a few of them were actually named winners. So congratulations to all the people who submitted and the winners last year. As we have been working with Lesley and with the Forté team on several of our initiatives, the number one question we get all the time is where do we find those cases? Where can I find a case that has a female protagonist? Where do I find materials that actually represent the students in our classroom, and as well as the organizations that they're going to be working in? And it's very hard. So I am really pleased that this case writing competition last year and now this year will be helping us build that learning content that can be used in classrooms throughout the world. So with that, I look forward to hearing about all the great submissions. I can't wait to see who will be announced the winner, and I certainly hope you submit something soon. So thank you very much and best of luck.
Okay, so now I'll just pass over to you, Juliet.
Okay, so let me just work out which one I'm sharing. Okay. Andrea, can you see my slides? They're just loading, I think.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning, for those of you in the UK and from, I think, all over the world. We seem to have a nice breakdown of people globally. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the logistics of submitting to the competition, but what I just wanted to do first was just kind of give a little bit more background as to why we think it's really important to make the case for women. And Lesley's given a really interesting and detailed analysis of the research behind it. But for us, we thought it was incredibly important for the content that we publish to be more representative of a broader field of people. So what I've done here is I've taken a quote from one of the protagonists of one of the award-winning cases from last year's competition, but I can't do it justice. So what I want to do is I'm hoping Andrea's just going to show you a short video from Catherine that's going to give you a little bit more insight into why this is so important.
Yep, so I'm just going to have to take presenting rights back from you, Juliet. No, sorry, I didn't realise that would happen, but just to show the video here.
Catherine, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story in the case CTIP Diversity in MedTech. You were exposed to cases in the classroom as an MBA student, and now you are the subject of one. So could you please share with us the impact you feel like that cases like this can have on students?
A lot of the times when we read a case study in business school, it's almost assumed that the protagonist is male, if not a white male, without it being said. So when you think about never seeing anyone, or rather reading about anyone who's like you at all, the fact that you get to see and get to read about someone who may be kind of similar to you is a huge deal. I'm making this cognitive effort every time to reimagine the case as if I'm in the case, and the further and further that protagonist is away from me, the more cognitive effort I need to make. It's really hard if every time you have to imagine yourself in the movie that is this case study, someone who's so different from you. And what diverse students or underrepresented students go through is they do that all the time. In fact, you do that almost naturally because almost no one you're looking up to or seeing is representative of you, your journey, or your space. So it's an extra mental exercise and leap to try to imagine what is a male's experience for you. You realize that there are some students in business school who never have to do this. They never have to make that cognitive leap or effort, whereas you're doing it all day, every day. The diverse female protagonists essentially never exist. That's horrifying because they do exist in the business world. And the fact that they're a very, very small percentage of case studies is incredibly misleading.
Thanks, Andrea. So I just need to go back to my slides. I'm not sure how, can you just tell me how to do that? Oh yeah, here we go.
That's fine, I've given it back to you.
Just bear with me.
So hopefully you could all see that video, but I can send links to the videos if anybody couldn't see it for any reason.
Yeah, so I thought that Catherine could say it much better than I ever could, because she's someone who is living it. So, and the fact that it relates to one of our winning cases from last year, I think it's really, really significant. So there's a full video which has more interviews from the other winners from last year, which I've included a link to in the presentation deck. So do go and take a look. And it's included on the Case for Women competitions page online. So just to give a little bit of an overview of submitting to the case competition. So we have a competitions page, and I've included a link to the FAQ section that sits on that page, which gives a little bit more information about the submission guidelines. And then it's submitted through Scholar One, which is a submission system that I presume many of you will be familiar with. The deadline is the 17th of August, so we still have a reasonable amount of time. And because of the involvement from the MBA Foundation this year, we have increased our prize fund to $12,000, which is really exciting. So thank you for Lesley and the Case for Women for their contribution towards the prize fund. It's greatly appreciated. So that's broken down as follows. So the winner would get $6,000, second place is $3,000, third place is $2,000, and fourth place is $1,000. So we've introduced an additional place for this year. The other thing I wanted to mention was that we do also have support resources available on the Emerald Cases Hub. So what I might do is, Andrea, I'll just wait till I've got to the end of my slides just to link out to that video, because I know you're going to play that. Just to give you a bit of an overview of the Cases Hub, it's an online learning resource. It's completely free to use, so you just need to register with your email address and a password, and it has a number of different resources available. So there's videos and support content about how to write cases, how to teach with cases, and learning with cases, which is designed for MBA students. So it's a really, really helpful resource. And we also have all of our webinars around our competitions. So this one will go up onto there if you want to take another look later on. And we also have some sample cases on there from our case content, so definitely worth a look. And so there's a link there, and I'll show you the video shortly. So just quickly on the judging criteria, I think Lesley has largely touched on this, so I won't go into too much detail. But as Lesley has said, the cases should have a female protagonist. Her characteristics should be described positively. There should be a balance of genders across the characters in the paper. The female protagonist should speak to another woman about the business, and authors are asked to include the pronouns of each person after they are introduced within the case. And then we've talked about the different categories as well. So hopefully if you go onto the competitions page, you can find out a little bit more information. And do also follow Emerald Case Studies on Twitter, because we're regularly posting details about our competitions and our cases program on there. Finally, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of our e-case collection. So as well as the Case for Women, we do have a full collection of e-cases in one resource. So it's made up of our proprietary content, which is the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, the Case Journal, which is published in partnership with the Case Association, and the Case for Women. But we also have a number of licensed partner collections. So we have a collection with Kellogg, one with Darden, Fudan School of Management, CSCMP, which is the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, and the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. We're also going to be adding new licensed partner content this year. So if you'd be interested in finding out a bit more about our case content, there's different ways that you can subscribe, and we are hoping to introduce eCase Select next year, where you can select up to 50 cases that you'd be interested in purchasing as an individual subscription or an institutional subscription. So either you can go onto this link here, or you can drop me an email and I can put you in touch with our product team. So finally, just to say, if there's any questions, do put them in the chat, but my email address is also listed here. So happy to pick up with you after this session if you have any follow-up questions that we haven't addressed during the talk today. So if I just come out of the presentation, Andrea, and if you could just play the quick overview of the Learning Hub video, that would be great.
Yeah, no problem. We do have some questions, so I'll just play the video and then we'll get to those other questions.
I don't know if we cut out a bit early there, but don't worry, there's a link in the chat.
Maybe a bit eager. I can send links anyway with the videos on. We'll send a follow-up email to everybody who's attended today and registered. And we can send the slides as well with all those links. And I have put some of the links in the chat so people can access them as well. Okay, so we've just got some questions here and some comments. Bear with me. Okay. Okay, so we have one here. Very glad to be joining this interesting webinar. Actually, my MBA thesis was a case study about a female school principal in Egypt, female leadership style on employees' job satisfaction. How can I contribute?
Well, it sounds like that would be really relevant to the competition. So if you go onto the competitions page that we've linked to in the email deck, and I think Andrea's probably put in the chat as well, you can find all the guidelines and submit, and then we can kind of go through the review process to make sure that it fits the criteria. But also I've included my personal email address in the chat, so I'm happy to take a look if you want to send that on to me as a starter for 10.
And just there was a couple last year that, well, the winner was set up a number of different schools, but there was a couple of papers entered last year on around education. So yeah, go for it. If it meets the criteria, go for it.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So we've just got a comment here. I wonder if we will ever live in a world where the key word is respect and no one is looking at what gender, race, sexuality, etc. someone is, but instead just the person within and how they act towards humankind. Wouldn't that be nice? That's from Vicky, the lady who put in a question.
Yes, it would be lovely.
Yeah, and something that we're also very mindful of is that you know, the representation of women is a big issue in case writing, but it's not just women, it's other underrepresented groups. And there's other challenges in terms of how you identify that information, because people don't necessarily want to share information around ethnicity or disability, but that's still an area that we want to try and pursue and improve the representation of a broader range of case protagonists. So it's definitely one for us to look at.
Is the 60-40 gender balance a requisite in cases where the workplace in question is female dominated?
I don't know if that's a question for Lesley, potentially.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I think one of the papers, I think the paper that came second last year had actually got more female characters than male characters. Yes, we would love to see a balance, but again, I think we don't need to be hard on ourselves as women, because you know there's lots of papers with lots of men in them. So the odd paper with more women in, fine. If it meets the criteria and it's a good paper, go for it.
Great. Is it important to have a gender perspective as a learning outcome of the case, or it can be a usual business dilemma with a woman as the primary protagonist?
I think from my perspective, it doesn't need to, it can just be a standard kind of learning objective, because the criteria don't specify it needs to, that area needs to be specific to gender. But I don't know if you have a take on that, Lesley.
No, I agree. I don't think it needs to be. The only comment I would make there is that if it is a female leader in the teaching note, does there need to be a small conversation around female versus male leaders, different leadership styles? But no, there doesn't. It doesn't. If it's a paper about an organization with a female leader, that's fine.
But it can't be fictional. All of them need to be based on kind of real people.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. So how many learning objectives would you expect to be included?
Oh gosh, I mean, I would refer you to the FAQs. I think it would be representative of a standard teaching case, so there wouldn't be any kind of different criteria there. But if you go onto the FAQ section that's on the competitions page, there should be more information there.
Okay, and is it? Oh no, sorry, I've done that one. That was the new one there. Oh, sorry, bear with me. If I don't win, will my case still be published?
So it will go through a review process. All of our cases do. So as long as it passes the process of double-blind peer review, then it could still be published. So I think for the collection for this year, we're planning to publish 24 cases, but obviously we only have 3 winners. So a number of the cases that were submitted that didn't go on to win have still gone on to be published within the collection. So absolutely, as long as it passes that double-blind peer review process.
Can I just say, yeah, and I think that's also about, you know, if it passes the process, being able to put as many female-led cases out there as possible for people to be able to connect with. So yeah,
absolutely.
Is there a limit on the length of the case / number of exhibits / length of the teaching? I think TN teaching note is that. So is there a limit on the length?
Yeah, if you go to the FAQs, that should provide all the detail on the case length. I can try and double check that while we're on the call, if you bear with me. So if you want to just check whether there's any other questions, Andrea.
Yeah, sure. What's the turnaround time on submissions?
It all depends really on the number of reviews that they would need to go through. We aim to have the review process done within 60 days. Generally, that's the target that we work towards. And once a case is accepted, we aim to get it published online within an additional 30 days. But some cases require multiple rounds of review, which can slow down that process. So those are the targets we aim for, but sometimes it can take a bit longer.
Okay. How should I approach a business I might be interested in writing a case about? Any tips?
That might be a question for Lesley, I think.
thank you. I think it's around highlighting that they're going to be showcased, right? And highlighting that they're going to be showcased, particularly with a female leader, and how basically we need more cases, and how they'll get, you know, a lot of students, a lot of people using them as an example. So it'll highlight their business basically and their business model. So there's something around that. And there's probably something about what is the outcome for them. Yeah, it's the highlighting. It might be looking at, do they send any of their employees onto MBA programs? Finding that out as well, or help them go to business schools, because there'll be something around that as well in terms of, and also about, because if they do, it's about their employees learning to see men and women as leaders. So when they come back into the organization, they're more bilingual around women and men leaders. So there's something around that as well. I think is that okay?
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's all the questions actually that I can see in the chat. So I think we do have the minutes.
In terms of sharing the slides, Andrea, I'm not sure, how does that generally work? Is it just that they're all included in the webinar, or can they be shared with the people who attended as well?
Yeah, so what I'll do is an email will go out tomorrow with a copy of this webinar video. I'll also include some of the videos that we showed, just in case anybody couldn't view them for any reason, and then also I'll attach the slides as well. So that'll go out to any of the attendees and also anybody who registered who couldn't attend or had to drop off. Yeah, so that'll all go out tomorrow.
Okay, and I've also just double checked on the case length, and actually to encourage as many submissions as possible, we're flexible with the case length, so it can be anything between 1,000 and 10,000 words. So if it's at the 1,000 end, we'd consider that a compact case, but we do publish compact cases, but they all have to have full length teaching notes alongside them.
And I'm going to say, for me, reading, not too many 10,000 words.
Compact cases are actually very popular with undergraduate students as well, so we are seeing a lot of interest in shorter cases. So yeah, we'd encourage all kinds.
Great. So I guess if there's no more questions, I guess we'll say thank you very much. Thanks, Lesley. Thanks, Juliet. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope this has been interesting and valuable.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll also be running another session towards the end of the competition closing. So if at that point you are working on a case for the competition and you have any follow-up questions, we'll share details about when that's going to be running in due course. So do follow us on Twitter to find out more about that.
Okay, great.
And please go write cases with women in them.
Absolutely.
We look forward to it.
Yeah, we do.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.